Okay, hey everyone, welcome to an episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. To have a really cool little comparison for you guys from the brand Seiko. A little about these types of watches. These two in particular that are going to be compared are both chronographs. Some key characteristics in design when you're looking for a chrono. Of course, you're going to find external pushers to activate timing functions with multiple sub-dials to measure elapsed time, often featuring additional scales dependent on the subgenre, which I think for these two is generally going to be, within that traditional chronograph motorsports aesthetic. One being a bit more retro, while the other being, of course, a bit more modern and contemporary. Now, these are both Seikos, and Seiko was founded as a brand back in 1881. They are Japanese in origin and have factories throughout Asia. They cover all market segments from entry level to high end. And the nice thing here is we're going to look at a spread here with that. So we're going to be looking at their entry level line of the Seiko Essentials, comparing it to their more high end Prospex Speedtimer. So on the left-hand side, you have the SSB 479 Meca-Quartz watch. It retails for $450, and at the time of filming, it's actually on sale for $382.50 from thewatchconnection.com out in Costa Mesa. Big shout out to Noah and their team for getting me the best pricing available. Also, now on the other side here, on the right-hand side, we have this Prospex Speedtimer SRQ055, which goes for $2,500 and it's also available, and I sourced it through thewatchconnection.com as well. Again, another shout out to Noah. But I thought it would be fun to compare these two watches, even though there's quite a big, like a $2,000 gap between these two, because I think they really represent two of the best chronograph offerings you can get from Seiko right now. And as different as they are, I think it's also very unique how many things I like that they both share. So I thought, why not get these next to each other? So maybe if somebody's cross shopping, or maybe you're looking at one and, maybe you'd be happy with the other. Who knows? Maybe you want both and see how well they pair next to each other. So with that said, let's go and zoom the camera out, get these pieces in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, now on two opposite ends of the spectrum, of course, but at the same time, very distinctly Seiko in terms of their design aesthetic and general DNA, right? Fully in-house, one being more, of course, in a vintage sizing at the 38.8 millimeters in diameter, whereas the other is going to be more modern at 41.5 millimeters. But I think both of them in their own way are kind of what different parts of the market were waiting for in terms of, that return to form for Seiko on the affordable end of the spectrum, where they're just doing extra, like they're doing unexpectedly nice things with this lacquer glossy style dial there, and then the little micro finishing on those indices and the overall dimensions. I mean, look at that. Even you're getting solid end links too. So there's a lot to enjoy and appreciate here for not a lot of money. And a lot of people, during their journey, that's what they knew Seiko for. But I will say realistically, Seiko has had high-end pieces, big, chunky mechanical chronographs in the past that were quite desirable. They just weren't very mainstream. And I think that's the case here. This is a Seiko Speedtimer automatic, and it's modern, and honestly, it goes toe-to-toe with all of the iconic chronographs that are out there right now in terms of modern variants. I mean, you're getting a vertical clutch, column wheel, fully in-house, right? You're even getting a hard coating on the steel. So there's a lot to like here. And at 42.5 millimeters, guess what? 41.5 millimeters. It's still very, very manageable on the wrist, although it's going to be a bit thicker at 15 millimeters versus here, let's say 12.7. Look at the thinness there. Very, very nice. And I mean, you got to think 12.7 with that high dome crystal there, which is actually a Hardlex mineral, which is going to be Seiko's proprietary crystal there, and it's going to be more resistant to scratches than your normal type of mineral there, so it's going to be harder, but also it's going to be a lot clearer than let's say if they were to use sapphire here, you might risk having a milky ring, although there's no milky ring here. But of course the curvature on this crystal is going to be a lot different, not going to be the box dome. It's just going to be just that standard dual curve low dome from Seiko. But I think this is also a really great looking watch. I love this watch, and even down to the bracelets, they're quite similar. I think of course there's a more dramatic taper here versus there. It's definitely a lot more marginal in terms of that taper, but at the same time, they're both 20 millimeter lug widths, and they're both kind of quite monochromatic. Of course, this one with that injecting that vintage styling is also going to give you a little bit of warmth on those subdials there, with them being slightly off white and ivory, versus here everything is going to be quite black and white, aside from a couple of silver tones that are really smartly placed there as well in terms of, let's say, that applied Seiko logo. So very cool. Again, very different, but also there's a lot that they have in common. Now, in terms of the lug to lug, 44.9, which is really just going to be just under 45 millimeters. So this is going to be very wearable for a lot of wrists, versus here about 49.5, which is not going to be quite as wearable on as many wrists. But when you think about it, I mean, I'd say the average size for a full-size chronograph would be around 42 millimeters, right? That's how wide the Omega Speedmaster Professional is, and this is right within that range at 41.5. So I really like this. You're also going to be getting 10 bar of water resistance, which is great. Of course, what you would expect from a Prospex watch, versus the Seiko Essentials only going to be 5 bar or 50 meters. Realistically, you're not really buying or using either of these watches to go submerge it underwater, but they both are going to have more than enough water resistance from that perspective. Inside here, you're going to have that Meca-Quartz Seiko 8T63. It's going to have a 3-year battery life, if you can think of that as the power reserve. And really what makes it unique here is going to be that 2 hertz or 14,400 vibration per hour beat rate on that tachymeter seconds hand. So very nice. You hear, and then you boom, instant snapback. And that's because it actually does have a mechanical chronograph gear train. So you're going to have quartz timing, but the actual pushers here are real pushers. They're not electronic buttons sending signals. They are mechanical pushers and function as such. And it is very, very satisfying. So you're going to have that more snappy feel there in terms of that engagement, more tactile, and then the snapback versus it sweeping back in a standard kind of quartz style. Now, here, of course, you're going to have some, I mean, it's fully mechanical, not just the chronograph action, but you're going to get that. And then you're going to actually get, of course, that column wheel and vertical clutch system. So the nice thing about the column wheel engagement is going to be how sharp it is. No stuttering. And then in terms of that vertical clutch, the nice thing is that it's not going to be adding any additional wear and tear as you're running it. So it's basically running as it would, as your watch is running, essentially. So it's not adding anything extra. When you don't have that, you can add additional wear and tear, and it's something you might want to, think about, right? If you want the longevity, the nice thing is you're going to have extra longevity because it's a mechanical timepiece in general. But it's something to consider when you're thinking about these specs and what they do besides look good on paper. But these look great. But let's go ahead and get them on the wrist. Of course, I've done full reviews of both of these watches here on the channel. Definitely look out in the channel history for the for the dedicated reviews. But you guys can see here on my 7.5-inch wrist or 19 centimeters in circumference, I think this looks absolutely fantastic. Check it out. It is a little tall, at the end of the day, but it's an automatic chronograph, so these are not inherently thin watches by any means. Yes, there are thin watches out there, but I will say the thin chronographs, that's kind of their shtick, is to be thin, and most tool watch chronographs are relatively thick, especially if they're going to have an automatic rotor whirring around in the back. Now, if you want that thinness, check it out. Hard to argue here with this. Look at that beautiful profile. Absolutely gorgeous. And again, it just exudes expense. This, I will say that this, even though it is the much cheaper watch, feels and looks quite expensive. A lot more than you would think. At under $400 is what these are normally trading for, and full retail is going to be $450. And the reason why they're not discounted deeper is because they're selling out at retail pricing. So it's just that time. But I'm sure if they keep producing these, eventually you'll be able to get them at more of a deeper Seiko discount. But this is a great looking piece. Really fantastic. And of course, same goes here. I mean, if you look at this, right, of course, you're going to have a little bit more of that negative space because it's black dial with black bezel. So it's going to extend and open up everything. But I think, again, this is a design that people have been waiting for, something more monochromatic. I'll say, even when I look at some neo vintage options, within this kind of price point, I myself even look for watches that were going to be more versatile. But a lot of those watches previously were just a little out there, and those designs were just not meant for everyday versatility. Whereas I think this, with this monochromatic setup and, just generally handsome aesthetic here, it just works. It just, again, feels quite modern, quite contemporary, very much tied into functional motorsports timing, whereas here you're going to get the retro vibes, retro aesthetics. I mean, this looks like something Baltic could have put out, and we love Baltic, as a French micro brand. But in terms of what you're getting now, and then you're combining that with in-house everything, I think that's really spectacular, especially when typically you'd be going to a micro brand to find something under $500 with a Meca-Quartz movement that is going to look this good and feel this good. So with that said, let's get these off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. All right, as you can see, even from a Lume perspective, quite competitive, right? Because neither of these are dive watches. They're not meant to be super bright or luminous, but they do give you, of course, some nice legibility in dark time, so you can still tell the general timing functions. Of course, I do like to work in a bit of a low light transition because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. And here's where you're going to see a couple of those secrets show themselves, right? So, of course, I think you enjoy that glossy lacquer style dial from that Seiko Essentials, but you're also going to notice a very faint sun ray kind of underpinning here on the Prospex Speedtimer, which I think, again, adds a little depth. I'm looking forward to seeing what other variations they come out for this model. Of course, panda dial would be amazing. Reverse panda, blues, whites, all the different dial options. I'm looking forward. I hope that they continue with this design language, maybe even add a couple of different bracelet or strap options, because I think that this is a wonderful platform. But you can see both very, very fun and very legible. Still ultimately quite legible. I think, of course, you're going to notice on the Prospex model, it's going to be more of a priority because it's more of a serious piece of kit. Whereas on the other, I mean, when you look at these bezel inserts, right, one is going to be essentially colored with the tachometer, which means in terms of reflecting, it's not going to be quite as easy to see, versus one's engraved and filled there with the tachometer scale. So you're going to see it's going to be a lot more legible. And generally, yeah, this Prospex is going to be more legible because it needs to be. That's really its purpose, and it has its style through functionality versus, the Seiko Essentials, which is going to be very design forward, and more power to them because it's a great looking design. Again, one of the more handsome, affordable Seikos that have been produced in recent years. So very, very cool. But we'll go ahead and get the lights back on here to get into some closing thoughts and whatnot. So some notable differences between these two models, if you haven't picked up on them quite yet, is going to be, of course, a $2,050 full price difference between the two. Also, of course, quartz versus mechanical timing, inherent with that, of course, apart from accuracy, you're going to have things like 3 years of a power reserve going from battery to battery and it being constantly running versus a little less than 2 days at 45 hours of power reserve, but going to be at a smoother beat rate at the 4 hertz or 28,800 vibrations per hour for that Prospex watch. Also, you're getting an uncoated Hardlex mineral in terms of that box crystal on the Seiko Essentials versus a sapphire crystal with an inner anti-reflective coating on the Prospex. Although, which should be said, it's not necessarily completely objective in terms of one's better than the other, because generally mineral crystals are going to be less reflective and more resistant to shattering, while being a little bit more susceptible to scratches, right? And then because they're so hard, you can't buff them out. Like, let's say if they were to put a plastic crystal on there, right? That you could buff, but would scratch super, super easily, right? So there's always that kind of trade-off scenario that's going there. Also, the Essentials has a stamped clasp, as you guys saw, while the Prospex is fully milled. So for me, guys, bottom line, while being on opposite ends of Seiko's chronograph spectrum price-wise, they both excel within their own segments, with high design and unexpected attention to detail driving the affordable option, and high spec with clean versatility driving their premium offering. And I think there's a lot of crossover here between these two models. I enjoy seeing stuff like this just sitting next to each other. So I figure, I like to make content for the type of content that I like to see. I like to contribute that content to the community. So let me know if this resonated with you. If it did, please do it like, and if you're already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.